We're back with episode 2 of the Step Through, a weekly WNBA show with me, Sabreena Merchant, and Evin Gualberto. Evin, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm doing better than apparently most of the WNBA, going down with maybe season-ending injuries for some, long stretches. It's rough. How are you doing?
Yeah, today was like very much news dump day for the WNBA with all those injuries and, all these roster changes that are having to be made now that people are coming back from overseas and have cleared quarantine and whatnot. But uh, interestingly enough, I've been having a great time watching the league so far with all the talent that is still in place. It just goes to show that even with 16 players out at the moment who we would consider like promising rookies or all-star level players, like they're still a really good 144. So maybe expansion? I don't know. It's a thought.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, so I wanted to start today by talking about, one of the players who stuck out to me most this week. And we kind of touched on her last week when we were talking about Sabreena and Evin, but she's the other half of what's going on in New York, and that's Betnijah Laney. And I don't know about you, but every time I hear the name Betnijah Laney, I immediately think of Laney Boggs from She's All That. Did you ever watch that movie growing up?
Yep. I'm not gonna scroll up, but I have the DVD here.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yeah. I'll find it. There will be a break. We'll take a break, and then we'll smash cut to. I'll be holding it up. So
that's perfect because it's kind of like very appropriate because I think of like the first 5 years of the Betnijah Laney experience is like when she's wearing her glasses and wearing like the falafel hat and no one really knows how exciting she is. And now now she's all that, right? Like that's where we have arrived with the Betnijah Laney experience.
Yeah. It's crazy. And we messaged off the pod, and I think you fell into a clip rabbit hole watching the different ways she's been doing her stuff, and I fell into a rabbit hole after you told me you fell into yours. It was not wise by me, but yeah, I know a lot about Betnijah Laney, and I really, really enjoy watching her.
Yeah, I was thinking about this while I was listening to an NBA playoff game the other day, like how much fun I would have listening to Mark Jones call a Betnijah Laney game, because like he just has so many different ways of describing people's performances. And like I very much think of his line about digging so deep into the bag, like where the fries are at the bottom, when I think of how Betnijah Laney scores, because there's so many ways to do it, right? Like this is why I got into a rabbit hole of watching Betnijah Laney clips, because there's no one way to describe what she does well. She just has been doing everything well. And when you combine that with a player like Sabreena, who can make every pass and commands enough attention as the primary ball handler, it's pretty freaking awesome what New York has been able to do over these first 6 games.
Absolutely. It's bananas.
Yeah, so just like a couple, stats to throw out to start with. She had 7 20-point games in her career. Keep in mind that Betnijah was drafted in 2015 before this season. And in case you haven't heard, the Liberty have played 6 games, and she's done it 6 times to start this year. So I'm still holding on to that DeWanna Bonner scoring title prediction that I made at the start of the year. But, Laney is complicating things, let's say, with how she's played so far.
Yeah.
It's really cool to watch her because, if you put her in the post, she can just like back down a defender, spin, fade away. Like her footwork in the post is tremendous, and there's no really stopping her once you get a smaller defender on her. We're going to talk about another player later, but like watching her just back down Marina Mabrey was like particularly painful to process for me personally, but she was just too small to guard Laney. And then if you put her off ball, like she just is constantly in motion and she can curl into her spots. Like there was one look against Dallas where she sort of curls from the top of the key and Sabreena just lofts her the ball into the, right underneath the basket. And there she is, just easy layup. It's astonishing to me, like how bad of a shooter she was at the start of her career. I mean, if you look at her 3-point numbers over the first 4 seasons of her career, she only took 16 threes in her first 3 seasons. And when she upped that number in like 2019, it was still 30% from beyond the arc. And you would have no way of knowing that watching the current iteration of Betnijah Laney, because she looks so smooth on her jumpers and beyond the arc. Like New York is just stacked with shooters, right? You've got Becca Allen, you've got Sammy Whitcomb, you've got Sabreena, obviously. And then when your best scorer is also a she's shooting 52% from beyond the arc at this point. Like, I'm not entirely sure what opposing defenses are supposed to do, but like, it's just hard not to feel supremely confident when Laney just spots up and, whether that's a catch and shoot or a pull up, you always feel good when the ball leaves her hands. I have a hard time seeing her in a situation where I think, oh, Laney is not a threat to score here, because those situations do not exist at this point.
Right. And what's crazy is like you said, the variance in the different play types she scores out of. So I was watching it. There are a number of times she'll get run off the line and she'll take it right to the basket. Ball handling in the pick and roll, cutting off ball. Like there's one, not to get like too film roomy breakdowny thing here, but like against the Mystics, she had this one play where she is cutting off of that Iverson cut, and after the second screen, she loops around. It's called Iverson loop for exactly that reason. And then she cuts right in and gets a basket. On ball, off ball, in between game, in the post, as a ball handler, like there's no, at this point, there is no answer for the problems
I love that you said there's no answer after bringing up an Iverson cut. That's perfect.
Unintentional, but great. And so that's exactly the thing. She perplexes the defenses to the point that like, what are you supposed to do? Here's a weird thing that I really enjoyed. Per synergy, Laney is so far only second in points per possession, in scores out of the post to Breanna Stewart. So, I mean, small sample size, yes, but to come second to Breanna Stewart and finish ahead of Sylvia Fowles in the post in any metric is super impressive to me.
Yeah, I mean, just to finish second to Breanna Stewart in any stat seems like a really good starting point. I mean, we're talking about a player who is, again, I don't want to like belabor the point here with a Betnijah Laney like narrative that has gotten us to this point, but like she's drafted by Chicago, right? She gets hurt in her second season. They waive her. She goes to Connecticut. They waive her. She goes to Indiana. They waive her. She goes to Atlanta. And finally, Nikki Collins like sees her shooting in practice and is just like, wait, how did we end up with her? Like, why did nobody else want her? And I can't figure out why the Dream didn't work harder to keep her. Maybe like the whole, ownership situation was like a red flag that Laney didn't want to stay there. I think about all the teams that spent like big money in free agency this offseason, cough, cough, the Sparks. And to think that they wouldn't target a player like Betnijah Laney is just maddening to me. But like you said, just as a scorer, she is so freaking complete. And I mean, I kind of wanted to get to this later, but like I was talking about this with Matt Ellentuck earlier this week, that like, if you're thinking about Team USA at this point, shouldn't she be on your short list? Like, I know she wasn't one of the 8 players that was designated as part of like the core members of the team, but like, I'm having a hard time thinking of 12 players from the US who are better suited to represent like what this country is capable of on basketball perspective, because she can do everything and she is on a heater. I mean, I would want her on my Olympic team. I haven't like gone into the whole like who are the 12 that should be in front of her, but if I were making all-star teams right now for the WNBA, I mean, she's on it. If I'm making all WNBA teams, she's on them, and that's top 10. So naturally speaking, she would be on my Team USA.
Yeah, I can't really add anything to that. I also haven't given it any thought, but with all the injuries that are happening and with how many of those players you project to be locks in that group, and then that next tier down, she should absolutely be on the short list, because at the beginning of the season there was talk about most improved, or should it now be MVP, because there's I mean, maybe it's just the people I'm following are very loudly supporting MVP Laney, but there's no answer for her right now. And I'm gonna come right around to it. She should absolutely be on Team USA, or at the very least a short list, or an invite camp, like a more active tryout process. We'll talk about the Olympics in a little bit, but yeah, Betnijah Laney just...
Yeah, especially if like Sabrena's potentially on a short list, like why wouldn't you just want to bring the two of them together? Because that's just instant chemistry between that duo. But I'm getting ahead of myself. We talked a lot about Betnijah as a scorer. I think what's really impressive is her as a ball handler as well too, and just creating actions for the other players on the Liberty. She's second on the team in assists behind Ionescu, obviously, but pretty good place to be considering, all of the work that she's doing, getting the ball into the basket herself. I like the way she plays in transition. She's really good at the hit-aheads, which is just a really great skill to have when you're a little bigger, getting those rebounds and able to push the pace, which is obviously something New York wants to do. You could probably explain this better than I can, but the Liberty run like a lot of these handoffs where Laney's just sort of like sprinting into the corner and another player's coming from the corner to get the ball on a handoff. And Laney just runs really hard into them and intentionally creates a lot of space for the shooter that's coming off of the handoff. And a lot of the times that's Allen, a lot of times that's Whitcomb. And you give those girls just a sliver of space and it's curtains for the defense, right? So I like watching Laney do that. And then as a pick and roll operator, she's also a lot better than I thought she would be. I mean, I don't know why I expect anything less of her at this point. I mean, I guess it's been 12 days into the regular season, so maybe it's possible for my expectations to take some time to match the level of her play. But she, did some pick and roll with Natasha Howard over the last 2 games. Unfortunately, obviously that's going to be put on rest for the next 4 weeks or so. But even like her pick and roll with Kylie Shook is pretty good. And Shook rolls hard and she's also able to pop. Like I know one of the reasons that New York drafted her was because they like her as a shooter. So yeah, just lots of things in Betnijah Laney's bag. I mean, it's just impressive watching her every single game and seeing what different skills she pulls out. It's hard to find like who to assign the credit to on New York because everybody's responsible, right? Like they added 4 players in free agency or, whatever method trade that are just flat out better than everyone who was on their team last year. And 3 of them are all-star level. So right. There's just a lot of credit to go around and everyone is playing their part. And for me right now, it's hard to find a team that is like just more fun to watch than New York.
Yeah. Something that you specifically talked about is that the action Laney has with the shooters. The thing probably my favorite Betnijah Laney action is when she has it's any action with the shooter, like the one you mentioned, the dribble handoffs to just going full speed, stuff like that. But also when she's the primary ball handler and they do that invert action where the shooters set the screen, and then sometimes Kylie Shook comes in. So we're talking about Laney bringing the ball down and Sammy Whitcomb sets a ball screen for her. And then Shook is not that far away. And Whitcomb, right after setting the ball screen, flares off of Shook. And now you have Laney going downhill, Shook as a roll or pop threat, and then Whitcomb like spacing. Somebody's going to get open, and it's just the way these pieces play off of each other. It works so well. And, obviously we aren't really even talking about Sabreena having the ball in her hands at this point. It's just the way New York leverages the talents of everybody on the floor and makes it so that everybody is a threat in just about every action is probably what helps make them super fun.
Yeah, and it was hard to watch them last year because Walt Hopkins had the same idea and just none of the personnel to run it with. And, it was easy to wonder, like, is this too ambitious for what New York has? Like, is Walt Hopkins a little out of his depth? Like, is he just being a little too theoretical? And no, they just have a significant talent infusion from 2020 to 2021. And now everything makes sense. And thank goodness, because like I said, just a whole lot of fun to watch that team.
Yep. So the Liberty have 3 of the top 10 in made 3-pointers on the team. Mm-hmm. Sabreena leads the league with 18 makes at this point. Betnijah has 12 and Sammy Whitcomb has 15. And so to have those weapons all on the floor at the same time, and you talked about Laney's passing, and Sammy Wickham as a playmaker, Sabreena, all of them can do so many different things, and just that's it.
Yeah, I mean, it helps that they've played like 1,000 more games than anybody else in the league so far. But even if you just account for per game, you still got 2 of the top 10. So they're doing something right.
Yep.
And they just took it to Dallas in their last game on, was it Monday or Tuesday? They all sort of blend together. I apologize for whoever's listening to this, but yeah, I think it was on Monday.
Right.
And Dallas was actually the next team that I wanted to talk about because unlike New York, who I think most people expected to have this not necessarily dramatic improvement that they've had so far. I don't think anyone was projecting them to be at the top of the WNBA standings at this point, but like there was an expectation that, hey, Sabrina's coming back. You've got Natasha Howard. Things are going to get better sooner than later. It was sort of unclear what was going on in Dallas because they just have an insane number of players who are trying to make that roster and 30,000 draft picks every season and new head coach. And I, for one, was just very confused as to what Dallas was doing and who they were even going to keep on the team. And like, when is a walk coming over and how is Charli going to fit in and all that stuff. What I have settled on is Dallas has probably my favorite player in the league in Marina Mabrey. And oh my God, when we talk about just ridiculous, no conscience, what is she doing on the court? Like Marina Mabrey is atop that list by like a significant margin for me in the WNBA right now. I think there was one three that she took against Seattle in their overtime game over the weekend that really got the attention on Twitter because there's about 11 seconds left on the shot clock. She spots up from the logo. Like, I don't want to, exaggerate this, but like legitimately the half court logo, she's at like the edge of the wing, so to speak, wherever they play in College Station in Texas. And you look and you're like, oh, so she thought that there was like less time on the shot clock. No. That's just what Marina Mabrey does. She just likes to launch from ridiculous distances and feels supremely confident in her ability to hit shots from that range. And fun stuff. She's taken 9 threes a game right now. And I know the 3-point revolution hasn't hit the WNBA like it has in the NBA. 9 is a lot for anybody. Like, that's just a really big number for a game that's only 40 minutes long. And with Alicia Gray still out with, for 3-on-3, I don't see that figure changing very soon.
So the reason I brought up the league leaders in made 3-point field goals is really because I wanted to talk about Marina Mabrey. So everybody else on the list in the top 10, they're all at 12 or higher. Betnijah Laney, number 10 with 12.
Mm-hmm.
They've all played 5 or 6 games. Marina has 13. She has played 3 games. That number is insane. And the way she does it, like, it's not as if she is just flowing into space spotting up, although she does a lot of that. But against the Liberty, she had one in the third quarter where she has Sabreena on her and she is going to go into a ball screen and Sabreena shades it so that she is trying to force her back to the sideline or at least navigate the ball screen better. And then she pulls back, goes behind the back, and it's an insane move because Sabreena is left reaching and she just pulls. She gets knocked down in the process, but they
didn't call the foul on that one too, which was really unfortunate.
Yeah, that would have lit Twitter ablaze if that was an and one.
Yeah, I just love that she has the confidence to pull, whenever, because there seems to be like more discretion in the WNBA in terms of when people take threes. Like, they want to make sure that they're good shots. They're not just pulling up for the sake of pulling up. Like, there are some shooters who will do that, like, Taurasi. But on large part, there is more of a commitment to search for better shots. And Marina just doesn't operate that way. Like, I remember talking to her when she was a rookie, and she said, like, she was something of a 2-guard, coming out of Notre Dame, even though she played next to Arike there as well. And she said that being a shooting guard was really hard in the WNBA because she never had the ball in her hands. And then whenever she got the pass, she felt compelled to like immediately shoot because she hadn't done anything for such a long time. And so she'd be like 40 feet away from her basket and just launch and then be like, why in the world did I do that? So it was like a real comfort for her almost to be like a backup point guard, because then she was able to do a lot of the facilitating and running of the offense. And so she didn't feel like she had to make a play whenever she had the ball in her hands. But even though she doesn't feel compelled to make a play, like that still seems to be the ethos with which Marina Mabrey plays. She's always trying to do something. She's always mixing it up a little bit, and she's a much better playmaker, I think, than she gets credit for. Just in terms of when you think of Marina Mabrey, like what kind of player she is, you see someone who launches 30-foot shots on the reg. Like you don't really think of her as creating for her opponents, but she's kind of gotten to the point where her shooting does actually create opportunities, for people on the team. Like just her sort of attempting to spot up will like bring another defender in, and then that sort of clears the corner for somebody else to take a shot. So I like the way that she's recognizing how her shooting can create opportunities for everybody else on the team. And then just like the combination with the Gumbawale is so much fun because like, I mean, I mentioned that like Marina is probably the most ridiculous person to watch in the league. Like Arike is not lacking for flair either.
So I went and looked again, went into Synergy to try and see like if there were any insane stats like the Betnijah Laney one. But too small a sample size for anything. So I went and looked at last season in the bubble. Marina is super good in isolation. She finished in the 95th percentile in offense, including passes in isolation. So there are only two players that actually finished ahead of her. And Aerial Powers only played 7 games, so that probably cemented her status as number 1. But Seimone Augustus was number 2. And if you're second to Seimone Augustus in isolation scoring
as a
and
shooting
assists,
guard, yeah,
you're just very good. So lots of analysis there from me, but like, yeah, it's just insane to watch.
That's a really interesting stat.
Yeah.
Second to Seimone Augustus, because incidentally, the Sparks traded away Marina Mabrey so that they had a roster spot to sign Seimone Augustus. 1 and 2.
So the podcast is now just the step through is home for your pain. That's what it's here for.
Yeah. I'm trying to enjoy it though, Evan. Like I still have such a great time watching Marina Mabrey play because she's just a lot on a basketball court. She's just trying to do things, make things happen all the time. And I think there is a real opportunity for Dallas to even get more utility out of her shooting. Like they don't really run her off of screens or anything super complicated yet. She's basically just spotting up or like, creating a kick out when the ball gets into the post. And then sometimes Arike will find her in transition because they seem to know when to look for one another. But I think there's a lot of potential there for having like Marina really juice up the offense off ball that hasn't been utilized yet. And that obviously like requires them to get stronger point guard play from other players on the roster, whether that's like Ty Harris or putting the ball more in Arike's hands, or maybe even like Dana Evans or something. Like there's options there. They just haven't gone to them yet. And I'm really interested to see what that looks like going forward because there's just so much talent in that backcourt, that Marike backcourt that the Dallas Wings have so lovingly dubbed. I like it. I think it sounds good.
Yeah.
I'm all here for shorthands.
Right. There's so much between the two of them that I actually do sort of wish that they would take some of the sets they run for Arike, not necessarily for the purpose of getting Marina the ball and as much usage as Arike, but the Wings love running this like strong or double stagger action where Arike will come off. Why not run that for Marina? They run like the basic flex action where Arike will set that flex screen, which is the screen from the block to the 3-point line, and then get a screen. You run that for Marina a couple of times. Her gravity, it's going to suck in defenders, and using her more on the move is going to unlock so many more things. And that's the thing I liken it to is when, in my experience, like when a high schooler, like when I've watched college basketball, when somebody starts getting hot and the ball, you can see the play develop and the ball is going to get swung to them, there's a sort of buzz and, limited fans and all of that, but you can feel, or maybe it's just me projecting, but there's a tenseness from the defense and an anticipation on the offense when the ball is swinging to Marina. and just like using that a little bit more, it's really going to juice up the offense, I feel.
Yeah. I mean, get the ball to Marina Mabrey more often, and I'm here for it. And I'm here for you to break down exactly why it's working. So yeah, let's get more of that, Vicki Johnson. Also, let's play Charli Collier a little bit more. We drafted her number 1. Like, let's just get her into the game once in a while. You know, I think she played like 7 minutes during regulation against the Seattle Storm. That's not enough. You know, they don't even really have. I mean, you could play her against Mercedes Russell. She's not going to like. She has to learn somehow. You know, I realize that there's a lot of young players on Dallas, and it's hard to manage everybody's minutes. But if Christina Nigwe is getting meaningful playing time, I think those minutes should go to Charli Collier. I just like, you already declined her 4th-year option. What are we doing here? You know?
Yeah, I mean, 15 and a half per game for the number 1 pick. That's just get her more minutes. It doesn't matter how you do it. Just get her more minutes.
Like, I like Kayla Thornton. You know, she rebounds the hell out of the ball. I like Isabel Harrison. She's got this little spin move. The Dallas announcers call her like Dizzy Izzy. It's a good time, but you need a 3rd big. That should be Charli.
100% agree. Okay, so transition into my favorite segment because I learned so much. We touched on it a little bit earlier. I just wanted to ask, so Evin Asks. We'll have fancy graphics at some point. Could you please explain to me how exactly the Olympic break is going to impact the season and what that looks like with the COVID protocols?
Yeah, so every 4 years, or I guess now 5, because the Olympics were pushed back a year, the WNBA stops in the middle of the season for the Olympic break because USA basketball is kind of a big connective tissue with the WNBA, right? Like the league launched after the 1996 Olympics when the women's basketball team first participated, you know, for USA in Atlanta. So it's very important for the league to have its best players represented at the Olympics. And the only way to make that happen is by taking time off during the season. And, you know, it's a little unfortunate because it disrupts the rhythm of the season. I actually was a big fan of it personally in 2016 because there were no Sparks on the Olympic team, which is a whole nother story because, like, how can you have an Olympic team without Candace Parker? But it really gave the Sparks a lot of rest as opposed to the Minnesota Lynx, who had 3 or 4 members on the Olympic team. And then when they met in the finals, you could kind of tell, oh, LA is a little bit fresher than Minnesota. And this is working out in our favor. But I digress. So they have to take the 2 weeks off for the Olympics because, you know, that's when the games are conducted. And then they take a further 2 weeks off for all of the training camp and, you know, preliminary things that the players have to go through in order to, you know, get ready for the teams. And it's not just for Team USA, right? Like, we've got international players all around the league who participate in the Olympics. This season, usually what happens is, like, everybody departs at the same time. It seems like this season, because Eurobasket is also this year, which generally does not happen in an Olympic year, but because the Olympics were postponed, you know, they ended up in the same year. Most of the European players just haven't come all together. So they're going to play in Eurobasket first and then just stay through the Olympics before joining their WNBA teams. But yeah, mostly what happens is, you know, we take the month off, everybody leaves, and then they come back and we start the season as if nothing ever happened. But with the COVID protocols, I know that, like, when players came from overseas, they had to submit 6 negative tests before they were able to start playing. Or if they're vaccinated, that shortens to 2 negative tests. So I don't think that the majority of players are going to be, like, particularly inconvenienced by having to go over and then come back. Like, it's not going to take much longer for them to be eligible because, for one, I'm pretty sure that all of the Team USA players are going to be vaccinated because Japan is supplying vaccines if they haven't already been vaccinated, and most of the WNBA teams are working towards that goal anyway. So it's only going to take 2 negative tests for them to come back. So it's not going to, like, add a lot more time in terms of downtime. And then when the W comes back from the Olympic break, we're going to have the final of the Commissioner's Cup. So there's even, like, more time for them to get ready, unless you're one of those 2 teams that happens to be in the cup, which I am interested to see how that affects the cup. Because, like, let's say, you know, Seattle is in the final of the Commissioner's Cup and Brianna Stewart is in the Olympics. And what if she takes, like, an extra day to come back from Japan? Like, is she going to be in the final of the Commissioner's Cup? I don't know, but we'll see what happens. The one thing that does bother me, just before we move on, about the Olympic break is that it means that there's no All-Star game. this year for the WNBA. And I understand that like it takes a little bit of extra time to have an all-star weekend, although you can kind of put all the activities on one day. Like they did that in Vegas 2 years ago and it was delightful. So it kind of bums me out that there are no all-star festivities, this year. What I wish the W would do is still name all-stars, which they don't do when there isn't a game. So like you'll look at, let's say, Nneka Ogwumike's basketball reference page, and she has been an all-star every single year that the W has had an all-star game. But like, I think that's almost misrepresentative of how Nneka's career has gone, because like in 2020, I don't think she was all-star worthy, but they didn't have one in the bubble, but they didn't name all-star teams. So we don't really know how to explain who were the best players that year. And I understand that there are, oddities and all-star voting and like fans get a say in things. And it's not like the best representation of who is playing, at the peak of the WNBA that year. But I do think it's a useful like historical barometer of looking back at a season. And we just don't get those in the Olympic years. And it kind of bugs me. I wish they would still name teams, even if there's not going to be a game. So something to consider, Kathy Engelbert. We should get those teams, even if we're not going to play the game. Baseball did it last year. I think it's possible.
Kathy, if you're listening, hi. Please make these changes. So I have a question like tying into that. So you talked about the players who, if they are participating this season and have to leave for Eurobasket, is there anything in place for, let's say, you have a player leaving to go to Eurobasket and they're going to be gone through the Olympics, but there's still that stretch where they're missing basketball. Is there anything in place for them to be able to fill that roster spot, or do they temporarily suspend the player or put them on whatever it is? And
yeah. So there's a couple of ways that works. If a WNBA team, which the maximum roster size is 12. So if they ever find themselves in a situation where they have fewer than 10 players available, whether that's because of injury or overseas commitments, they are able to sign a player to a hardship exemption. And so we see that in Chicago right now. I believe they've been signing Natasha Mack to like a couple of hardship exemptions when their players go in and out with injury. And they've got, obviously, Steph Dolson is out with 3-on-3 and Allie Quigley and Candace Parker are unavailable. So they've got this extra player coming in, who doesn't like count towards that 12-person roster limit, but they have, the ability to bring her in because they don't want any team to be below 10. I think it's because they want everybody to be able to scrimmage like 5-on-5. That's kind of the impetus, for wanting to have 10 players. And then in terms of like bringing in a 13th player on a longer term basis, you can temporarily suspend the contract of a player. And so that's what like the Mystics, I believe, did with, or actually, I don't know if they re-signed Wiese, but I know that's what the Sparks did with like Maria Vadeeva, who's with Russia for Eurobasket. They temporarily suspended her contract. So her salary still counts towards the cap, but her roster spot does not. So they can sign a 12th player provided they have the money to fit her salary, underneath the cap. Oh. They haven't done that yet, which why? It seems like you could probably use another player right now, but that is an option that is available to them. I'm sorry, I don't mean to keep doing this. I live in LA. These things affect me. I apologize.
I mean, I don't know how entertaining it is for the viewer, but watching you get upset about things that are happening with the Sparks we're talking about the Sparks.
Sure.
We talked about this before the first episode, is that our games of the week are geared, it's a way to talk about teams. And so, we're going to try and not have the Sun, the Aces, the Storm as the Sky as a game of the week every week. But like, we're getting a lot of Sparks talk out of this, so I think it works. I like it.
I'm glad to hear it, Evin.
I'm sorry for your pain, but I like it. Anyway, so actually, let's shift over to our game of the week. And at the time we decided this was going to be our game, the Connecticut Sun were undefeated. They lost. We're recording this on a Wednesday. They lost last night to the Storm in overtime. but the Sun played the Aces, and you tweeted at me, which is it's always cool to have a celebrity tweet at me. But so if you could just give me a list of reasons why like this was the game you wanted.
Yeah, it's a good question. I feel very much like that like Stefan Saturday Night Live sketch with this game because it has like a little bit of everything, right? We've got a rematch of the WNBA semifinals. So one, right? We've got little playoff intrigue. Two, we've got two players who are just coming back after having opted out in 2020, and Jonquel Jones and Liz Cambage, who are two of the premier centers in the league. Entirely different styles of play, though. So I just love watching them go after one another. We've got, in my opinion, my favorite point guard matchup in the league of Jasmine Thomas versus Chelsea Gray. Yes, I went to Duke. That's not why this is my favorite point guard matchup in the league. It's just really fun to watch them go up against one another. And I think Jasmine feels the same way. And, you know, you've got like, just in this game, there were so many interesting things that happened where you had one stretch where Raquana Williams was on a heater. You had one stretch where the Aces were having so much difficulty just trying to get anything going into the paint because it was so clogged against this Connecticut Sun defense that they played a 5-out lineup. Like, when is Las Vegas ever going to play a 5-out lineup? We've got Asia, Dearica Hamby, Destiny Slocum, Chelsea Gray, and Jackie Young all on the court at the same time. And it's just like, oh my God, a modern offense from the Las Vegas Aces. Who knew that they could do this? So just a ton of really interesting back and forth going between these two teams. And I think it's a really interesting comparison for our last week's game of the week, which was Aces and Storm, because the Storm are just all about space, right? The court is so open against them. And the Connecticut Sun are just the exact antithesis of that. And I don't think it makes it any less entertaining. It's just a completely different way of looking at the game. So I just had so much fun watching like this ridiculous defensive battle, you know, at points. And thankfully it did not get like the slog that it was in game 5 of the playoffs last year when like neither team could hit the rim for 4 minutes. Like, this was much better basketball. Thank you, Jonquel. Thank you, DeWanna Bonner, for making sure that happened. But yeah, just really interesting defensive strategy both ways, really interesting offensive strategy both ways. I have said a lot. What did you like from this game, Evin?
Ooh, okay, there's so much I did not realize. So when I start threading, so if you are into that sort of thing, check me out on Twitter. Like, I will do game threads, and I figured out the best way to do that is to delay it slightly so I'm not losing my mind trying to catch everything in real time. But there was so much. But when I started threading, I did not expect Liz to pick up her second foul very early in the first, and for the Sun to finish the quarter, I 17-9, something like that. Mm-hmm. And so, like you said, this game had everything. This game had an improvement in the defense, because we talked about it last week. Actually, we didn't talk about the Aces being terrible defensively in game 1. So, like, one of the things right off the bat that I noticed is that they went to, it's called a scram switch. I'm sure if you're a basketball fan, you've heard it before. So Chelsea Gray is on Jasmine Thomas. Jonquel is going to set a ball screen, and doing that forces Hamby to switch onto Jasmine. And then Jonquel backs Chelsea into the post. And as this is happening, Asia sees this. She communicates with Chelsea to scram off as she takes that matchup. And then Chelsea has to go navigate and find whoever Asia was defending. And it doesn't work out for the Aces because Jonquel is very good in the post. She's very tall. She takes a step back fadeaway, or I guess it was just a fadeaway. She didn't step back. Mm-hmm. But the Aces are improving defensively. The communication is getting better. It's getting more crisp. And there's so much to love. The player that stood out to me in the first half, I feel like Destiny Slocum kept them in the game with her effort and intensity. And I'll have a couple clips here. She navigates a pair of screens and moves her feet and just stays in front of Natasha Heidemann. And then she sprints down the floor. She gets swinging the ball, pump fake, and then swings the ball, gets a hockey assist. And then there's this insane stretch where Dejanay is bringing the ball down in semi-transition, and Destiny keeps up with her and then takes a charge. Ball goes the other way. I'll fast forward past this part, and then the next time down, the ball gets stripped, and she is the closest defender. The ball is in the post, gets stripped. She's the closest defender, and she's standing on the wing. She dives on the floor to recover the ball, and the Aces get the ball going the other way. And then there's another sequence where she absolutely eats up Natasha on ball. And it's just counting stats, not that impressive that game. 3 points on 1 field goal attempt, 2 assists. You wouldn't really think that she had a huge impact, but just watching her effort, it's a big deal. There's another sequence where it looks like it's going to be a one-on-one in transition for the Sun. She keeps pace, tracks back, and is able to strip the ball. And I think whoever was doing the game said that she got a piece of the ball. And I don't think that I would have been able to notice that if that was not pointed out to me. But just, if you're not going to be the type of player who can produce offensively, a coach better be able to put you in and have you change the game with what you can. And I think Destiny really brought that.
Yeah, I thought her shooting was actually really important in the fourth quarter when Connecticut kind of started to build a bigger lead, and then they needed just something, to be able to get back into the game. But I mean, this isn't going to be surprising. The defense that really stood out to me was Jasmine Thomas. I mean, the history of Chelsea Gray playing against Connecticut in the playoffs is not great. Over the past 2 years, she shot 12 of 42 from the field against Connecticut. She had 13 assists to 12 turnovers and 25 points over 4 games, which is, suffice to say, not what you're looking for from your lead guard. And it's not because, Connecticut throws the kitchen sink at her. It's because they have Jasmine Thomas, who can just get up into her and make life difficult. And she was denying Chelsea Gray the ball 94 feet, when somebody else is bringing it up, right? She's tailing her, or she's not tailing her, but she's on her when Chelsea's bringing the ball up. It was so hard for Chelsea to even find just an inch of space against her, which is why I thought what Chelsea did really well was get out in transition when they couldn't match up. So when she's guarding Natasha Heidemann on the other end of the floor and they can get going quick, then Heidemann has to guard her. And that's a matchup that Chelsea was super comfortable with. She got, a pull-up jumper against her in transition. I mean, there was another play at the end of the first half where I think Jasmine Thomas missed a layup, on one end, and then Chelsea just pushes it. And once again, Heidemann is forced to guard her and just is hopeless because, like we mentioned earlier, Chelsea's a big guard and Natasha is a normal sized guard and just doesn't have the physical, abilities to keep up with Chelsea. There's no shame in that. Natasha Heidemann brings a lot of good to the court, guarding Chelsea Gray, not one of them. So I thought that was really interesting that, the Aces figured out a way to make Chelsea more effective in this matchup than she has been in the past. And there was just one play that really stood out to me where Chelsea actually steals the ball from Jasmine Thomas when Jasmine is trying to drive into the paint, and then she pushes it and does, the Chelsea Gray semi-no look, just a dot to Hamby right underneath the basket and one. That's when the Aces were on their big run. Really great to see her figure out a way to still excel even against significant defensive pressure.
Right. Yeah, that's the crazy thing is that the pass, it looked like it was from about the same distance as the one against the Storm. It didn't look as flashy, but they showed a bunch of replays and I thought maybe it was better. Yeah. Maybe. And then, yeah, just another pass I want to highlight because if we can do Chelsea Gray passing highlights, let's do that. Yeah. At the end of the first half, the Aces had at this point taken the lead. They enter the ball into Asia at the elbow, and then they set a strong or double stagger for Chelsea to come out of the corner. At the same time that Asia hands the ball off to Chelsea, she takes a dribble and pump fakes. And as that's happening, Hamby is coming out of the corner to cut to the basket. That Chelsea pump fake, freezes everyone just enough so she can whip it in there, and Hamby gets a layup near the end of the quarter, and it's just I can watch Chelsea pass all day.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun listening to the announcers just try to give her nicknames. Like at one point, one of them was calling her Madam Gray because she has like a crystal ball and can see where her teammates are going to be, which is like whatever. And then the other one was like, how about Gray Matter? Because she's using her brain. I was like, that's really bad. That's really bad.
They committed to that. Gray Matter was the graphic they put up when they ran with the first half stats. It was you can do better. Workshop.
I'm all for trying though. We're early in the season, right? Like it's a learning process. We're figuring things out. Like sure. I went with Betnijah Laney Boggs earlier. Like there's a working period here.
It's true. But the thing is, with like Chelsea, what you can do is you can put the work in and make it seem like you're organically coming up with it in the moment. Just like the way Chelsea does that, like she passes it. You brought this up. She passes it, and then at the last moment of the thumb flick, she looks away. Like, that's not a no look pass. No. That's what you can do with these nicknames. Like,
before we do move on from this game, there were two other things I wanted to highlight. One of them was just Liz Cambage completely stonewalling DeWanna Bonner when she was trying to get a layup. There's one play, I believe the score was like 35-31 at this point, where Liz blocks DeWanna and then just says, come at me several times, just taps her chest, come at me multiple times. And then later in the game, it's like 50-48 at this point. DeWanna comes, Liz blocks her again. This time the ball doesn't go out of play, but Liz makes sure to yell at the Connecticut bench as she's getting back on defense. Like, look what just happened. There were obviously a lot of other comments made in this game that I don't particularly have the time to get into, but watching Liz, just exert her defensive dominance on, again, a really great score in DeWanna Bonner. It was so much fun. And one last thing. I know we talked about Jonquel Jones last week, who is just a unicorn among bigs because like you were diagramming the sets where they run, where Jonquel is basically a guard, in terms of how she's fitting into these actions. They also have Bri Jones, who is a far more traditional center. I just like watching her footwork. I mean, she is just really solidly fundamental when she gets the ball into the post. I mean, she posted up A'ja Wilson and did a spin, got A'ja going one direction and was able to turn baseline on her. She did the same thing to Jisoo Park. There was this one sequence where it seemed like Vegas had gotten the defensive rebound and then Brianna just sort of takes it away in the corner, comes baseline and finishes with a reverse. She had one pick and roll where she, has her head on a swivel and just passes the ball directly out to Bonner, who hits a big three. Like, I know that she's not like an exciting type of player, so to speak. She doesn't do flashy things like Jonquel or, hit long range jumpers like DeWanna, but she's just really good at what she does. And I'm a sucker for good, solid, fundamental post play, especially a player who can seal the post, which is another thing that Bri Jones does well. It's so funny. We had this mock expansion draft, for WNBA teams, and my team was the San Francisco Seals. And thinking back, that's exactly the team I should have picked. That was so perfect. I like Bri Jones. She's good. I'm happy to see her play.
Good. The thing I really enjoy about Bri is that she is good enough that I think maybe again it's what I'm seeing, but there are calls for Jonquel she's listed as the 5. We talk about her as a 5, but if Bri is on the floor, she's not really the 5. She's the biggest player, but she doesn't play like the 5. And playing Jonquel at the 5 would unlock the 5-out sets and do so many more things. But the two of them play so well together that there's a perfect complement. One of the best ways to do that is to highlight the building off of, I'm not going to do the entire Sun playbook, but just another play that the Sun run, which is very similar to roll in replace and veer, like we talked about last week, is they set a ram screen. So Jonquel is in the post. Bri sets a screen for Jonquel, and then Jonquel goes to set a ball screen for Jasmine Thomas. And what that is a ramp. It's screen, and then the person you screen sets a ball screen. At the same time that happens is DeWanna Bonner is clearing out the strong side corner. And so the ram doesn't seem like it does very much. But what it does is it gets the defender out of position. The defender in this case is Asia. She is now behind by half a step. You pair that half a step with DeWanna clearing that corner, and now you have it's not wide open because Asia is the MVP for a reason. She gets back, and it's a tougher shot than it has to be without her effort. But Jonquel finishes. It's just that stuff is the two of them. There's such a, like I said, the roll in her place. When one rolls, the other pops out. And Bri is enough of a threat, or she is good enough and smart enough to make plays in space that I'm actually really good with them being the front court pairing and them sharing the floor at the same time. Do I wish Jonquel would be deployed more as the 5 and the only big on the floor? Yeah, sure. But such that it is. If I can, I'd like to run through a couple of stuff that just actually the end of the game. Yeah,
let's start with that.
Some of those sets. So let's start with, it doesn't seem like it's the very end, but it builds off of that. So let's jump in just under 4 minutes left in the fourth. Natasha enters the ball into Bri in the post, and they're on the left side of the floor. Jonquel is at the top of the key. As soon as the ball is entered into the post, Natasha then goes to screen for Jonquel. Split action is what most people call it. So Jonquel flashes to the ball, hits 3 in Asia's face. Next time down, now it's Jasmine Thomas. Dejanay Carrington is in the corner, actually, and Bri is in the post. Jasmine, we all love Jasmine, or we both love Jasmine.
Yeah.
If you don't, why? Anyway,
yeah.
So Dejanay is in the corner. Jasmine waves her through, so it clears out. And then she enters the ball to Bri and then goes to set that screen so Jonquel can come right off again. This time, Jonquel rejects and goes into the lane. And now Bri passes it to Jasmine, and now you're looking at an empty pick and roll. Sets a ball screen. Liz Cambage has to navigate this now. She drops because Jasmine Thomas can turn the corner still. And the two defenders converge, and that leaves just enough room for Jasmine to throw a pocket pass to Bri, who takes a short jumper, and that extends the Sun lead. So it's just stuff like that. And we talked about this off the pod. The final play, not the final play, the dagger, the DeWanna Bonner dagger. So sideline out of bounds play, DeWanna is taking the ball out. The action that happens here it's not really all that relevant. So Jasmine gets the ball, and then DeWanna is going to sprint from basically the hash where she inbounded the ball all the way through to the opposite corner. Now what's going to happen is Jasmine, Jonquel, pick and roll, empty corner. Nothing comes of it because Chelsea and Asia are able to contain it well. So Jasmine swings the ball to Bri at the top of the key. DeWanna is in the corner, and Tisha Heidemann is on the wing. What's going to happen is it's going to be a perfectly timed cut through by Natasha. And as that cut is happening, Raquana has to stay on the high side because you can't let that pass go through because it's a 2-point game with 41 seconds left. Now, Hamby is on DeWanna. Like I said, it's perfectly timed. So as Natasha starts to cut, DeWanna is lifting to the ball. And there's a moment there where you can see Hamby is trying to get through, but because of the angle, because of where the ball is, she has no room to get through that gap. And that leaves DeWanna with more than enough room to shoot. She's going to shoot it regardless, but seeing that she has that space means she's gunning it. And yeah, that was the dagger.
Yeah, I mean, that game was like surprisingly interesting at the end. I thought that Connecticut had sort of pulled away with it, and then they did all of the things that you're not supposed to do at the end of the game when you have a lead, which is, use 24 seconds of clock when you're not getting a good shot off, and then just straight up turning the ball over and letting the aces get out in transition and then fouling them. Just just a real clinic of things that coaches are going to pull their hair out over, at the end of that game. But it all sort of worked out because DeWanna is DeWanna, and they, like you said, got her just enough space to get off that three, which just a beautiful shot. I love watching Alyssa Thomas celebrate too. Alyssa was wearing a Ben Simmons jersey to that game, which is just a beautiful comparison of their two games. Who would Alyssa Thomas love other than a guy who can't shoot and gets all of his damage done in the paint, but is also just a tremendously versatile defensive player? Like, yeah, I like it, Alyssa.
Yeah. So unless you have anything you're dying for me to break down, which I don't think anybody is. Like, if I have it, cool. I think that takes us into our what are we looking forward to segment. So
yeah. So for me, I haven't really had a chance to watch the Mystics yet. And I've been hearing very good things about Tina Charles. You may have heard her name once or twice, but I am really interested to see what they look like, because I was just worried they didn't have enough perimeter creation without Elena Deladon healthy, and obviously Miesman is unavailable. I'm not sure that how much they've been using Maisha Hines-Allen, but Tina's been putting up numbers, and it hasn't exactly translated to wins across the board, other than obviously one very impressive win against New York. So I'm curious to see what that looks like. And also, my girl Sydney Wiese has just entered the starting lineup in Washington. So very excited to see how she is able to help in that situation.
We'll have a bunch of Sydney Wiese makes here. Just, I love left-handed players. I love coaching them. I studied a lot of lefties when I played. It's just, I really enjoy watching lefties. And the way Sydney just, it's violent the way she steps back and then loads into her shot. And I've really enjoyed that. For those of you that don't know, the Mystics are my local team, so I watch all their games anyway. Also, you can watch them too on League Pass if you haven't yet. League Pass is a steal. Invest
it's only
in League Pass.
$17, and there are like 28 games left for every team, so very much worth the investment.
Yep, 100%. Yeah, I just if we're talking Mystics, I've watched a couple of their games. You're much more in the know about the WNBA than I am. You are the expert. And so I just don't think there's enough right now. Certainly not right now. But even if Elena comes back and she is 100%, there's so much missing from that championship core. And Alicia Clark she's done for the season. And there's only so much. Natasha Cloud is one of my absolute favorite players to watch. I've worked a basketball clinic with her. She is like the most kind and giving person that I've ever, definitely the most kind and giving professional athlete that I've ever been around. But that carries over to the court too. She takes the young players under her wing. She moves the ball. She's able to spread it and stuff like that. So she's a joy to watch. But it's hurt to see the way things have gone down in Washington, because there's just not enough. And when healthy, could they be a contender? Yes, but we'll have to wait a year to see what they fully look like. So that's unfortunate.
Yeah, I was actually really looking forward to watching Minnesota. I know you mentioned this last week, but now that they've gotten Collier back, it's like a whack-a-mole type situation where now AP is out, and so they still don't have their full complement of wings there. I still think that the Collier McBride duo at the 2-3 is going to be really something to watch, because Minnesota's bigs are really skilled. With Dantas and Fowles, like you can make magic happen there, even if you're not running like a super 5-out lineup. So that'll be good to see Napheesa come back.
Yeah, so a holdover from last week is the thing we're excited to see. To play.
Hey, I didn't realize that she was not going to play the entire week after I said that she was the thing I was most looking forward to. The oddities of the WNBA schedule, right? Minnesota had one game and she was unavailable for that one.
Right. Yeah. Okay, well, buy League Pass if you haven't, and use it to watch Napheesa Collier. Her debut, I'm sure will be exciting, if for no other reason than she's going to step through.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, thank you all for listening to our show. Let us know if there's anything that you want to talk about, and tell your friends, because the WNBA is awesome and you should be paying attention.
Cosign. Bye.